To the Point with Kelly Dunn and Michael Williams.
He has more endorsements and more contributions than any other candidate for Palm Beach County State Attorney. So why are his opponents saying Dave Aronberg isn't qualified for the job and is part of a political machine? Good morning. He is the best-known candidate in the three-way race to be the next state attorney in Palm Beach County.
He's also the candidate who in many ways has come under the harshest criticism. Dave Aronberg here to talk about his campaign to be the next Palm Beach County State Attorney. We thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me back.
Talk about your background. You are well known in this state, but there are, I'm sure, some people out there who don't know your resume. So give us the thumbnail sketch.
Sure. I'm a native Floridian. I was born and raised in South Florida and went to public schools. Then went to Harvard and then Harvard Law School, where I graduated with honors. I then went to Steele, Hector & Davis, a major law firm. I practiced corporate litigation, and then left to work with Bill Nelson, who was the insurance commissioner. And together, we went after European insurance companies who stole policies from victims of the Holocaust, the largest consumer fraud in the history of the world. After that, I went to go fight consumer fraud full-time as an assistant attorney general under Attorney General Bob Butterworth. I went after scams against seniors, and then President Clinton appointed me a White House fellow, so I worked at the U.S. Treasury Department for international money laundering and the laundering of terrorist assets. That was my focus. Then came back home and helped start the Attorney General's Economic Crimes Division here in West Palm Beach, and then was elected to the State Senate, where I focused for 8 years on criminal justice issues, and then for the last year and a half, I've been a special prosecutor under Attorney General Pam Bondi, going after pill mills and prescription drug trafficking.
Why run, and what are the biggest changes you would make in a county that's increasingly diverse and has a wide variety of issues? What would you concentrate on? What do you think are the biggest changes that need to be made in that office?
Yeah. You know, I focused my entire career on protecting public safety, protecting our families and making our streets safer. And so when I found out that the state attorney's office here in Palm Beach County had the lowest conviction rate in the state of Florida, I couldn't just sit aside. I had to get involved, and I decided I was going to run. I was going to run even if it made me run against the incumbent Democrat, because the people in Palm Beach County deserve better than to have more criminal defendants go free in this county than in any other place in Florida. So what needs to be done is this. We've lost a great deal of veteran prosecutors over the last 3 years, over 50 in the office. Any law firm that sustains that kind of loss will suffer. You need to help bring back some of the veteran prosecutors. You need to increase the training to make sure that the young prosecutors who are there are better trained, so they're not just by themselves flying by the seat of their pants. You need to make sure the morale is higher, to let them know they're valued. These are people who work very hard for less money they can make in the private sector. They need sometimes a leader who's been there, who can tell them that they are a valued employee. Plus, one more thing that's important. We need to depoliticize the office. The office, in recent years, has been, unfortunately, too political. I've worked across party lines for the cause of justice. We need to work better with the federal government, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and with the State Attorney General's office, the office I came from. And that way we can better fight crime here in Palm Beach County.
Well, that's a good jumping off point for an argument being made by people who say the Democrats, and by extension you, have politicized the office, and there's been pressure to keep others out of the race. In fact, Kelly, I think you have a quote from one of the opponents on this.
Exactly. And we had Dina Kiever on last week on To the Point, and there was a Palm Beach Post report that said your supporters warned one potential opponent, Judge Krista Marks, that if she ran an ethics allegation, it would be filed against her and that could hurt her career. In addition, someone would run against her husband, a judge who is up for election. So did you know this was going on within your campaign?
Well, absolutely not, and it was not in any way involved with my campaign. There's never even been a suggestion that I or my campaign has been involved in this. And I have great respect for the independence of the judiciary. I have great respect for Judge Marks. And I found it interesting, by the way, that after that story was published, the source of the story, Chief Judge Peter Blanc, the head of the 15th Judicial Circuit of all the judges, wrote a letter to the editor repudiating the comments attributed to him. He said he was grossly misquoted, and so it repudiated the story. And
I think we have a quote we can put up here.
Great.
Talk about this as we put the quote on screen. Is this the quote you're referring to? It says, Chief Judge Peter Blanc told the Post, the Palm Beach Post, he was asked by longtime County Commissioner Bert Aronson to let Marks know, and you can continue with what it said there, that running for state attorney could put her husband's judicial seat at risk, and saying that is not accurate. Amplify on that.
Well, Judge Blanc, in the email that he sent to the Palm Beach Post that was never published by the Palm Beach Post, said, not only did I not tell this to the Post, underscore not, the commissioner never made such a request. So you know, this is something that has been reported and been refuted, and I'd like to move on to the real issues of this race, which is what are we going to do to make the Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office have a better conviction rate. We're right now the worst in the state.
In fairness to that issue, one of your opponents, Robert Gershman, who's running with no party affiliation and also argues that he was essentially told by the Democratic Party, we'd really prefer you not run. He says, among other things, listen, here's one bottom line. I have experience as a prosecutor and defense attorney in a courtroom that you cannot match. Let's listen to what he had to say.
He has no experience in the criminal justice system. In state court, he doesn't appear, doesn't have the knowledge or experience in everyday cases or the issues that affect the voters, the communities, and those that crime impacts in Palm Beach County.
Talk about that criticism. Have you prosecuted a case, taken a case to trial? What about the argument that you do not have the depth of experience across a wide range of criminal cases to lead an office in a county that has a growing number of issues it needs to deal with whether it's gang violence, juvenile issues, corruption, you name it?
Well, I respect my opponents, and I respect his right to have an opinion, but he's not entitled to his own facts. I have prosecuted cases. I recently helped convict a defendant of heroin trafficking. We got him a 30-year sentence.
When was this?
I prosecuted this. It was just a couple months ago. And, you know, I have experience in and out of the courtroom. I have experience as a state senator who's written a lot of our criminal justice laws that the next state attorney is going to have to enforce. And I have experience prosecuting cases. See, but the most important thing is that I have experience managing.
Cases that went to jury, that you took
Correct.
to trial, went to juries?
Correct.
What was your conviction rate?
Well, I have a very good conviction rate. In cases, you plead some cases and you take it, I have a very high conviction rate. But I say this, the key to this is a managerial position. We're not running to be assistant state attorney. We're running to be state attorney. This is the manager of the office, the CEO. The CEO of Starbucks should know how to make a cup of coffee, but that's only a small part of his job description. I manage an anti-pill mill initiative statewide. People who work for me, and we've been able to have tremendous success. My opponents, I respect that they have experience on one part of the job description, trying cases, but this job is much greater than that. It's not just about trying cases, it's much broader, and I've got that broad-based experience to be the best state attorney.
You mentioned, though, that the state attorney's office has become very politicized, that position, and that's what angered Dina Kiever, she says, into running against you. She was angered when we spoke to her last week about these allegations that work was being done so that you wouldn't have opposition in the race. We're going to listen to her next, and let's see what she had to say last week right here on this show.
I was enraged, and I believe that that was not a fair situation, and that the voters of Palm Beach County should have a choice, that the state attorney should not walk in unopposed, unexperienced, and supported by a political machine.
Your response?
Well, if we had this conversation 6 months ago, I would be telling you that I was about to run against Michael McAuliffe, the incumbent Democratic state attorney. And I went to the party chair and party leaders, chair. Correct. And I said, I want to run. And they said, we are supporting Michael McAuliffe. Do not run for this position. I was told also that if I ran for this position by a couple activists, that it would be the end of my political career. And unlike my opponent, I didn't quit the party. I didn't change my beliefs. I stayed and I fought and I became the Democratic nominee. Fundamentally,
and you touched on it a moment ago, fundamentally, what do you think by dint of experience? Do you believe it's your ability, as you seem to allude to, that you have a 50,000-foot view that gives you more ability to master this job than your opponents? Do you concede that while they, and let me ask you, do you concede they have more courtroom experience than you?
I will concede that as far as hours in the courtroom, they probably do have more courtroom experience.
So they've tried more cases in the courtroom.
I would concede that.
But you're saying that your experience, where you trump them and why voters should look at you, amplify on that again.
Sure. You know, I bring a breadth of experience that my opponents don't have. I help write the state's laws against gangs, against prescription drug abuse and pill mills, against identity theft, and against sex offenders. And I've enforced the law as a prosecutor. I worked under Republicans and Democrats. The former state attorney, Barry Krischer, who served for 16 years, and who also was Mr. Gershman's boss, has endorsed me in this race.
That's correct.
Because, you know, it's important when you run the office, you need to know how to manage people. You need to know priorities. I didn't just move here and said, I'm ready to be your leader. I've been a part of the fabric of this community. I've walked the streets with law enforcement searching for sex offenders who did not register. And that's why law enforcement unanimously in this race have endorsed me. Every single endorsement from law enforcement has been for me because they know I'll best protect public safety.
Both Robert Gershman and Dina Kiever both told us over the last 2 weeks that a lot of your endorsements were given before they entered the race.
That's, again, not true. The endorsement, for example, from Barry Krischer, I heard that comment on your show. That's not true. Barry Krischer's endorsement came after this race was already set. It came after Gershman got in the race. And also, remember, we're a free country. If Barry Krischer thought, and any other group that's out there, the PBA or the FOP or the state troopers or even the firefighters or Attorney General Bob Butterworth, if they thought that any of the other candidates were comparable to my experience, then they could not endorse me, they could endorse them. So far, I've gotten every endorsement in the race, but I do realize that the only endorsement that matters is the voters on November 6th.
Let's wrap up again. I want to be perfectly clear for our viewers and give you that chance. Uncategorically, do you state here that you in no way directly or indirectly asked for pressure to be applied in any way, shape, or form, just so there's clarity, you talked about it, on any candidate to not jump in the race? You would have taken on all comers.
Oh, absolutely. I have never been involved in any such tactics. My campaigns have never been involved in such tactics.
Have you heard that the Democratic Party applied that pressure? And if in fact they did, have you gone to them privately? And now we'd like you to make it public if indeed you haven't said, guys, I don't want that, you're hurting me. Has that kind of conversation happened?
There were rumors that were going around, and I went to the people involved with the rumors, and I checked with myself.
Who?
Well, I want to mention, I talked to a county commissioner who was mentioned, and this was before the Peter Blanc email, which said that the county commissioner never said this, but I went to him and I talked about it, and I made sure that everyone knows that I've never had any ethical blemishes in my entire career, let alone my political career, and we're not about to start to have them now.
Did you tell the Democratic Party back off if in fact you're doing this and pressuring others?
Oh, well, first off, they know I'm my own man, and when they tried to get me not to run against Michael McAuliffe, I didn't listen to them then. So they know that we're going to win this together. I have support from Democrats and Republicans. You know, I work for Pam Bondi, a Republican Attorney General.
Sure.
So to say that I'm a creation of the Democratic machine when my last job was with a Republican Attorney General is just political rhetoric.
Very briefly, talk to the voters, the ones that really count, as you just said. Why should you be the next state attorney in Palm Beach County?
To be state attorney of this county, you have to wake up in the morning, every morning, and think about how we can make our streets safer and protect our families. I have dedicated my entire career, from the time I was working for the U.S. Treasury Department on international money laundering, to fighting against pill mills, to working against sex offenders in our community. I have dedicated my entire career to make our streets safer. I got in this race even against an incumbent, because I believe we can do better and improve our conviction rate. If the reason why you're getting in this race is because you're motivated by anger at a party boss or retired political activist, you shouldn't be in this race to begin with. It needs to be in your core. It needs to be in your DNA that you want to fight for the safety of the people in this community, and I've spent my entire career doing that.
Sir, thank you for taking time to join us on To The Point.
Thank you. Thank you.
And still to come, our roundtable up next, including we'll examine the race for state attorney right after this. Our roundtable is up next with the Palm Beach Post reporter who broke the story about the allegations of intimidation in the state attorney's race. Now for our roundtable with Brian Crowley, author of the CrowleyPoliticalReport.com, and Joel Enkelhart, a reporter from the Palm Beach Post, whose story documented the attempts to have Dave Aronberg run unopposed. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us. First, give us the headline from the interview we just had with Mr. Aronberg. Joel, we'll begin with you. What do you think after hearing from Dave
I think he went over the ground that he has been going over in most of his appearances, and he did a good job of explaining why, although he doesn't have the level of courtroom experience that the other candidates have, he is emphasizing management. And that's his approach.
In fairness, he was concerned about what appears to be an attribution error about things he may have said. Is he at least in that regard right? But does it change the substance of concern about what the Democratic Party is doing? First to the attribution.
He made an extremely creative use of a letter the chief judge wrote to the paper privately. It was very deft, but it was wrong. What the judge wrote about was a different story. Mr. Aronberg has confused it with the April 15 story. He wrote a letter about a story that appeared on May 2nd that improperly quoted the April 15 story. It was supposed to be an attribution. It was an attribution to Judge Blanc that actually in our main story was stated by Bert Aronson, the county commissioner. And the judge just said, I didn't say that, the commissioner said it.
I know that some of that's inside politics and baseball. To the viewer, Mr. Aronberg said uncategorically, look, I've not pressured anybody to not get into the race. And if the Democratic Party's doing that or did that, I said to all comers, get on in the race.
Well, the story didn't say the Democratic Party.
No, but I'm asking,
the story said that his supporters said it.
Right.
And he did not really address that issue. But he has, in the story, denied any involvement. And the story, he did acknowledge knowing about one of the main allegations in the story. And he is taking the position that it didn't happen. And the story quotes the judge who it happened to. And she makes a very clear comment that something happened, but she's just not going to go into detail about what.
Brian, you want to weigh in?
Well, I mean, I think that, as we talked about last week, this is not atypical, I think, of what happens in politics. I think trying to strong-arm people in races and stuff like that, I don't think it's right, but it happens all the time. I think I'm not terribly surprised that some of the folks in South County might be part of some effort to try to pave the way for Dave Aronberg. I think in the long run, it's going to be very difficult for these opponents to defeat him in this race because it's going to be largely about money. He's got a lot more than everybody else.
He's got a big war chest.
And as he said, when he was planning to run against Michael McAuliffe when he was still in that office, he says he felt the same type of pressure, that there was people, pushing back on him.
Look, there's always political pressure. If you look at the U.S. Senate race right now, there's some pressure being pushed onto George Lemieux to try to get him to drop out of the race, and he's resisting that. Every cycle we have people that suddenly drop out of races. Look at Adam Hasner suddenly dropping out of the U.S. Senate race and deciding to run for Congress. Alan West decides that he's going to go up to the Treasure Coast and run, which shoves Congressman Rooney off into the West where he never intended to run. There's hardball politics behind the scenes, just as there is, as we see in these TV ads. I mean, nothing that happened in this particular instance do I find surprising. Do I think it crosses a little bit of a line there when you're threatening to have filed ethics complaints and stuff like that against somebody? Yeah, I think it crosses a line, but. I think David Aronberg would have helped himself had he come out perhaps very, very forcefully saying that he was outraged by this kind of behavior and wouldn't tolerate it from his supporters.
And I agree, and that's what Dave said. What you're saying is that it happens all the time. And I agree that it probably does. What made this extraordinary, and what I think contributed to people wanting to talk to the paper about it, even though they would not, in some cases, give their names, was that it was against a sitting judge. Somebody who considered herself sort of above the fray. And when all this partisan skullduggery began to come down on her, she said, I was just thinking I could be a good state attorney. I don't want to get involved in this. And she backed down.
Factually, not asking for editorials here, but factually, based on what you found, should the finger pointing be more at the Aronberg campaign? Or as he's argued, listen, if there's an argument to be made here, and indeed you've made the case for that through your reporting and digging, the case is to be made to point the fingers and ask questions of the Democratic Party.
I don't think it was the party at all.
You don't?
I don't think the party was involved one little bit.
All right.
This was individuals who support Dave either as part of his campaign or beyond his campaign into what you called the South County politics.
Right.
And I want to add, this is the kind of reporting that the Post does at its best. It's the right kind of reporting to do. Voters have a right to know about these kinds of things. The voters have an opportunity to make their own judgment about this kind of story, and they'll make that decision when they go to the polls. This was the right story to do, and some people get their feelings hurt when a newspaper or a television station looks into these issues. My answer to that is too bad.
And let the readers or let the voters decide. Let them debate it and throw it out there, and let them decide if it's beyond the norm.
Valid as far as what they think about when they go to the polls. Thank you for your digging and your reporting.
And we'll be back with more in just a moment. In our remaining moments, our Crowley closer.
Well, I have to admit I was surprised last week when the Club for Growth, one of the heroes of the Tea Party movement, came out with an assessment of the freshmen in Congress, and Alan West turned out to be weak tea. He wound up in the bottom third of their ratings, not doing very well at all. So the Club for Growth is not impressed with the hard-charging Alan West. He may be a little more talk than action as far as the Club for Growth is concerned.
So we'll keep reading the tea leaves on the way to November with all the candidates. Thank you as always. Joel, thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for spending time with us on this morning's To The Point. If you'd like to send us a comment about today's show, go to WPTV.com and click on the political link. For now, thank you again. Enjoy your Sunday. We'll see you next week.